Welcome, everyone. We're gonna pause for a couple, like a minute or so that people can start filtering in all the attendees. All right, and let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Ford Safety Insights webinar. It's going to be an exciting and informative webinar on an innovative system that uses your existing crash data and supplements it with other data sets with reference to the Highway Safety Manual. My name is Justin, and I'll be your host along with Karen. We are the activities co-leads for Illinois ITE. For your information, all attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have a question during the webinar, please put it in the Q&A or chat section at any time during the webinar. And here's our agenda for the webinar. Before we get into the Ford Safety Insights, we want to give you guys some updates on Illinois ITE and ITS Midwest. First up is Jenna, who's the ITE Illinois Section President. Jenna, what's going on with Illinois ITE?
Thank you, Justin. Just to reiterate what Justin said, thanks everyone for coming today. It's really exciting for us to see such a great turnout at one of our events, although a bit unsurprising given the speakers we have lined up for today. We know it's going to be a great presentation. To give a few updates, we sent out our membership survey yesterday. So I'm hoping everyone saw that email come in, and I am encouraging you to please fill out the survey. We've been about a year in this COVID virtual world, and we are really interested to hear from our membership what we're doing well, where we could improve, what you want more of, less of. Ultimately, the success of our organization is contingent upon people wanting to come to our events. So we would really love to hear from you. And there's also some Starbucks gift cards on the line. So, great incentives there. On top of that, we also have an upcoming technical event scheduled for early April as well. So please be on the lookout for that. And now those are my current updates. So I will turn it over to ITS and Scott.
Good morning and afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank Jenna, Karen, and Justin for allowing ITS Midwest to be part of this webinar with Ford. Here, as we get it fully into 2021, you will, if you pay attention to the itsmidwest.org website, we have a fairly healthy webinar series that is more or less scheduled all the way through summer, with webinars roughly every 2 weeks at this point. So some of that is some of the presentations at our annual meeting that we could not fit into the online approach in a full one-day event we did there. So we'll be seeing a lot more webinars this year out of the organization. Our one quick plug, our annual meeting is hopefully going to come off in person in November in Louisville, Kentucky. And again, we're a 4-state chapter, including Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and Kentucky. So I appreciate everybody able to join, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Scott. And as I'm introducing our panelists, I'm also going to launch a poll. So if you could answer the 3 quick questions that can kind of give us some insights as to background knowledge and where people are coming from. Our two speakers from Ford Mobility are Andy and Cal. Andy and I know each other because he helped facilitate Ford Mobility's partnership in one of my connected vehicle grant applications. He currently serves as the head of mobility engagement for the Midwest and Canada and has extensive experience in transportation, mobility technologies, energy, and the environment, including various projects at FHWA's Connected Autonomous Vehicle Research Program. And Cal is the product owner of the Safety Insights web-based tool. He has a wealth of knowledge in data analytics and has worked with or for a variety of organizations, including local and state government, urban planning and design consultants, universities and colleges, nonprofits, and more. Cal gave me a presentation of Safety Insights back in January, and I was very impressed with the platform and his desire to continuously improve it. And without further ado, I will hand it off to Andy and Cal.
Wonderful, thanks, Justin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I think Andy's going to kick us off here.
Thanks, Cal. All right. Hey, thank you guys for having us here. If anything, we're very thrilled to come back and meet a lot of you guys. Because some of you may have seen us probably a year and a half ago when we presented some of our work on another data product called City Insights. So now here we are. And as Justin pointed out, it's been a great opportunity for us to share some of the work that we've done with Justin that has got his interest, and he got us introduced to everybody here. So today what we're going to do is just set the stage, just show you a quick overview of what Ford Mobility is and how we fit into the larger organization. And then I'll pass the baton to Cal, and he will give an overview of the Safety Insights product and then do a demo. So without further ado, just a quick overview of who's Ford Mobility. So we are a new outfit that was started a few years ago, and we embarked on a series of new ideas and projects. And now we are actually a part of Ford AVLC organization. And here we work with cities very closely across the country. And I am an engagement manager who's working across cities in Midwest and in Canada, and have counterparts across the country that are looking at similar things, working together with communities, understanding their challenges, and building tools like the one that Cal has built. Cal? So in our engagements with community leaders, we started talking about what are all the things that we are supposed to focus. And in our conversations, as you can see here, a lot of the mayors since 2017, we've been talking. A lot of them pointed out that infrastructure is a big issue, and of course, public safety is another huge issue. So here's a product that we built that kind of brings all this together. And Ford cuts across a lot of these different areas in through different programs. Like, for example, we're working on AVs, connected vehicles, and a couple of other products like Spin, which is our scooter program, and then there's Transloc. So pretty much everything that you see as a city's priority, we are touching on them in a different way. So here's our leader, Mr. Bill Ford, talking about how cities of tomorrow will need to be reconfigured, because it's one thing to build a smarter vehicle, but they need a smarter infrastructure that can talk to the vehicles. So that kind of set us on a path where we are today. Cal? And of course, we are entering this business with about more than a century of knowledge, understanding, and building mobility solutions. After all, we are the first ones that proudly built the automobile that has changed the planet now. And here we are. It is our motto, opening the highways to all mankind. We did that for about 100-something years with a different kind of a platform, but now we are going into exploring how we can do this further. And as you can see, mobility is a part of our DNA now, and we no longer identify ourselves as a car company. We are a mobility company. So yeah, and we are working with cities around the world. I mean, we have Ford Europe and other places where we are trying a lot of different new ideas. And we are now here bringing to your community some of these great products. And I'll stop here and pass the baton to my colleague, Cal, and he's going to walk us through the product and the demo of the product.
Perfect, thanks, Andy. So thanks everyone for attending. Really happy to share a little bit more about what we've been working on with the Ford Safety Insights team. So first, just to kind of build off of what Andy was sharing about this, rapid kind of evolution in the transportation mobility space over the past 10, 15 years or so, that we're only kind of seeing accelerate, I think, in the more recent, maybe 3 years. In a similar way to kind of that broader mobility evolution, traffic safety is also, kind of a good example of how that change is happening. So, when we look back, kind of traditionally, there's a set of data and a set of approaches that have been used when it comes to traffic safety planning and analysis. So often relying on crash data, historical crash data, which is really useful, of course, and that, there's never going to be a replacement for that crash data. You need that as sort of the foundation, but we also understand that it has some limitations, right? It only is telling you a slice of what's happening on the roads when it comes to traffic safety. So we know that there's, unreported incidents, there's near misses, there's potential for bias or subjectivity within crash data and crash data reporting. Like, for example, 2 different police officers may fill out a crash report in 2 very different ways. Or I think we've all seen, crashes maybe coded at the wrong location or with the wrong category or those kind of things. And that's just part of, the data. And it's all data has issues and limitations, but we need to understand those and find ways to supplement that or complement it with other methods or other approaches. And luckily today, there's a lot of additional data, there's a lot of additional tools at our disposal to help kind of make the shift from a little bit more reactive when it comes to safety planning and getting a bit more proactive. So that's kind of the thinking in terms of how can we build tools to help make that shift, to help get a bit more proactive. How can we do things like bringing in additional data that helps paint a picture of near misses in addition to just those underlying crashes? How can we streamline and automate best practice methods so that transportation planners and engineers and professionals are not spending an inordinate amount of time finding data, crunching numbers, sifting through spreadsheets, weeks at a time. Instead, how can we, empower those transportation professionals to move more quickly and make informed decisions? So that's really what we've tried to do with Safety Insights, is build a tool that brings in sort of the best of traditional safety planning and analysis, working with crash data, the highway safety manual, best practice methods, countermeasures, all that good stuff, and bringing in sort of what's emerging in this space. So connected vehicle data, other kind of big data sources, bringing all this information together at once can be really, I think, a powerful shift in how we do safety planning. Ultimately, our goal is to help, provide this tool, provide these resources to transportation professionals that can save them time, let them move faster, ultimately to then drive improved outcomes on the roads, right? Reduce crashes, save lives. That's sort of the target that we're trying to help play a part in. So a little bit more detail on what that looks like, and I'll get into a demo in a little bit as well. But at a high level, there's kind of 3 primary elements or pillars of the Safety Insights platform. First is just the ability to bring in all of that disparate data that I mentioned. So the crash data, the connected vehicle data, underlying road data, pull all that stuff together. That's no easy task, right? And allow you to visualize it, filter it, run analysis on it, all kind of under one roof. So that's really the first step, but that can only take you so far, right? Just compiling data. Really the key is, how do you make sense of that data? How do you generate insights? And that's where the second component comes in, which is where we've built in a variety of analytical features within the application so that you can take that next step and identify safety hotspots, run network screening analysis, get statistics about the details of the crash profile of any given location, right? All of those kind of abilities to go from that full scope of data to an area that you might want to focus on. But again, problem identification, identifying areas of focus, right? That's great, but ultimately, we know transportation professionals want to find solutions, right? They don't just want to find the problems. They want to think about what solutions might be best fit for a given location. And so that's where the third component comes in, which is where we've integrated a repository of safety countermeasure research from the CMF clearinghouse. And what we've done is enhanced that with some on-the-fly calculations on our end to localize the CMF values to a given location that the user has chosen. So we can say, you know, for this location, this intersection, whatever it is that you've chosen, based on a countermeasure that you're looking at, we can generate a prediction for annual crash reduction and what that crash reduction would mean in terms of societal cost savings. And this is all based on, you know, best practice methods that are well outlined and trusted in this space. What we've done is just kind of pulled it all together and helped, you know, move these things more quickly. So I touched a little bit on some of the data. Wanted to get into a little bit more detail here. So as I mentioned, traditionally, there's a set of data that's been used in safety planning work. Crash data, some kind of vehicle volume exposure metric, and the underlying road asset or road network information. And that's never going to change, really, right? That's the foundation. You need that sort of core set of data inputs, and we provide those, we integrate those through safety insights as well. That's really where you start, right? That's the key information. But there's opportunity to layer in additional data on top of that. And that's where you can plug in the countermeasure information, connected vehicle data that can help uncover near misses and other kind of interesting trends, and then getting multimodal when it comes to the volume information. So there we work really closely with Streetlight data, a company that some of you may be familiar with, and we integrate their multimodal traffic volume metrics so that you don't just have the vehicle volume, you can also start to understand pedestrian volumes, bicycle volumes, freight volumes, and get that full sort of picture of traffic or travel on a given road when you're thinking about safety changes and what might make sense, right? A heavily trafficked ped and bike corridor you want to treat differently than you know, high freight corridor, for example. So having that context is critical. So I just mentioned, right, working with the data from Streetlight, working with some of the information from the CMF clearinghouse, the data that we bring to the table in terms of Ford connected vehicle data insights, and then the data that comes from the public side, the crash data and such. You bringing all of that together is really critical, right? All of those elements can be useful on their own, but when you bring them all together, that's really where you can have greater insights you can generate with all of that data sort of compiled and ready to use in one system. So you don't need to go tracking it down and acquiring it sort of all separately. So a little bit more information on the connected vehicle data. So what we do within the Safety Insights platform is we've identified a number of connected vehicle event types or signals that are relevant to safety planning and analysis work. So those are things that are indicative of maybe a near miss or some kind of road condition issue where a driver maybe had to make an adjustment, those kind of things. So looking at like harsh braking, harsh acceleration events, harsh cornering events, forward collision warnings, there's a variety of others that we're looking at including and integrating into the future as well. You know, you could think about traction control events, lane departure warnings, right? There's so much potential when it comes to connected vehicle data. And so what we do when we integrate that information is we're de-identifying the data, we're aggregating the data so that there's no risk from a privacy standpoint. Instead, you're dealing with the data at a level of trends, right? So for any particular road segment, what's the distribution of harsh braking events and when do they occur, and being able to understand, you know, this road maybe on Mondays during the peak time, there's a lot of harsh braking. On this other road, maybe it's a different time of day or different kind of distribution. That's the type of information that we display. That can be really useful, right, when it comes to staying on top of maybe emerging trends as well, because this is data that we can update very regularly, right, daily, or even, you know, getting more granular than even a day compared to waiting, you know, for the new crash data to come out. You can maybe keep a pulse on the roads and what's changing and how are things evolving. Maybe you implemented a work zone and you want to see what did that do to harsh braking, right? Is there something that might be happening here that we might want to address before it manifests in a number of crashes? That's sort of the ultimate goal, is to help, you know, the connected vehicle insights can complement the crash data in that way. So with that background, I'm going to jump out of the slides for a minute and go over to show a little bit of what this looks like in action. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to spend about 10, 15 minutes or so going through a demo, show you kind of what the product looks like, and then I'll jump back and have another slide or two, and then we'll open it up to questions. So first, there's this kind of homepage when you first log in. So the product is a web application, right? So you have login credentials, all the data is preloaded. You can come in and you can create different analyses. You can analyze different data, you can save it, and then you can jump back into those analyses after the fact. So here we can say, maybe we want to look at ped bike analysis, right? And we can create that project. And then that'll jump you into the map interface where now you're able to interact with the data spatially and the different data layers on the left-hand panel there. So the first thing I'll do is kind of show we can filter down to maybe a specific area that we care about. So the version of the tool that I'm showing right now is preloaded with data for Metro Detroit. So 7-county region in the Detroit area of Michigan. But you can imagine, right, this data plugged in for any other jurisdiction with mostly the same functionality from place to place. So you can choose a specific county maybe you want to analyze, or a specific city of interest. In this case, maybe let's say Detroit. And so that'll zoom the map to center us on the city of Detroit. And then you can see there's also within this map filters option, there's the area dropdown we just looked at. There's also, you can have road characteristics, so maybe ownership or functional class or speed limit. You could layer in a number of filters, time ranges, so maybe certain years of data or months, days of the week, time ranges. Maybe you want to look at, just the AM peak period or something along those lines. Any number of filters that could be layered in here. Then you can drop in the crash data, and this will load for a few seconds. And you can see right within the crash data, there's a variety of attributes and filters that you may want to slice and dice the data by. So perhaps you're interested in, rear end collisions or fatal and serious injury collisions, or different crash factors. So in this case, you can see the data just loaded on the map there. So this is all crashes in the city of Detroit. Maybe let's say, hey, we really care about bike and pedestrian crashes. So we can do that, and the map will update pretty quickly. And the next thing you can do is, okay, I can look at these crashes, I can click on individual crashes and get a pop-up. Okay, what's going on with this particular incident? But I want to understand some trends. So let me click this button here, show crash hotspots. And what that'll do is run our hotspot algorithm, which is based on a method that's outlined in the Highway Safety Manual that essentially helps identify excessive crash locations. So what we're doing is running a negative binomial regression model with an empirical Bayes adjustment. Essentially, we're looking at each location in the selection we just chose. We're looking at the characteristics of each location. So what's the volume, length of the segment, speed limit, number of lanes, et cetera. We're able to generate an estimated crash rate for that location. We compare it to the actual number of crashes that happen there. And then based on that, we're able to generate the list of hotspots, the areas with the greatest difference between what we would expect and what actually happened there. And so those are the locations in pink that showed up on the map. And this is dynamic, right? This is based on the data that we just chose. So we chose City of Detroit, bicycle and pedestrian crashes. So these are our Detroit ped and bike hotspots. And so you can see those on the map. We also generate the list view of all of the locations that were identified with some statistics. You can export this list to an Excel or a geospatial file. You can download it, work with it offline, pull it into other analysis, all that good stuff. We break it out by intersection and road segment hotspots. And that's just based on each crash is identified as either an intersection crash or a road segment crash. And then what you're able to do is get into a little bit more detail. So we can see, okay, there's a cluster of these hotspots kind of around this greater downtown and midtown area of Detroit, if anyone's familiar. And so what you're able to do is actually come in here and you can say, I want to actually draw a custom area. So I'm going to draw a polygon here and actually sort of just draw a border around these hotspots within that location. And what we're going to do here is create a custom area for our analysis. So we can say we're done there. And what that's going to do is choose the locations or the crashes that are within that sort of boundary that we just drew. And it's going to generate some statistics for us. So just in this kind of greater downtown area that we just drew, here's the breakdown of the crash profile. So we can see 364 crashes fell within this area. Here's the breakdown by severity. We can get some additional information down here. Here's the breakdown by crash type. And so again, this is just the ped and bike crashes, right, based on our choice. So we can see, okay, about 2/3 of these were pedestrian, about 1/3 were bicycle crashes. Here's the time of day breakdown. So most of them tend to cluster near the later part of the day. Day of week breakdown, trends over time. So we actually see this was increasing a little bit over this 5-year period, right? So there's a lot of good detail about what's happening with these particular incidents. And then what you can do is also, so I'm going to go ahead and actually remove this custom project area. Just wanted to kind of show that view there. So we can clear that and say we're done. We want to go back to the full city. And then what you're able to do is you can layer in some of the connected vehicle event data as well, if you kind of want to see that side by side with the crash hotspot data that we just generated. So we have hard braking, hard acceleration, and hard cornering loaded into this application. And so the way that data displays is at a road segment level. And the same filters apply that I was showing in the map filter. So if you want to choose different time ranges or different road types, it'll filter this data as well. So you can see we kind of show it at this segment level where you're able to now see the side by side. In this case, we're looking at hard acceleration events. And so you could see maybe how these line up with some of the hotspots, right? So here there's a high kind of hard acceleration corridor leading right up into a hotspot here. Same with here on Jefferson Avenue. You see the same thing. There's a few locations where we don't have a ton of hard acceleration data, but they're still hotspots. So anyway, kind of interesting just to get that additional context right there. And then the final piece that you can do is you can jump into any of these hotspots or any individual location within a custom area that you've drawn. And you can say, I want to jump over to the countermeasure portion of the application. So actually, let me drop this data off here. Oops, sorry. I'm going to load it back in. I think something got stuck on my end. So I'm going to do, let's see, we'll do the bike and pedestrian crashes again. Load those all in. And then I'm just going to jump over to the pedestrian or the countermeasure portion of the application really quick. And so we can generate a list of hotspots. Let's go over here. Oh, sorry, we just pushed a new feature and it's not loading for me right now. So let me try something different really quick. And otherwise I'll just jump ahead. So if we can draw a custom area again, we'll circle these hotspots here. And then what you're able to do is, if you want to come in and here, actually I'll layer in some additional data so we can see the additional crashes here. You can click on any of these road segments and you can say, I want to view countermeasures for this segment. And what that'll do is pull you over to the countermeasure portion of the application for that location that we just chose. And so here, what you're able to do is filter down this list based on whatever types of countermeasures you might be interested in. So in this case, we may say, okay, bicycle and pedestrian oriented countermeasures, and the list will update. And what you're able to do is look at the different kind of breakdown of countermeasures. And you can jump out to each of these and see, okay, where is the underlying information coming from for this countermeasure? And it links you directly back to the CMF clearinghouse. You can jump into all those details. And then you can, within the countermeasure table, you can add different solutions to a report that will generate for you and give you some summary information of this solution and what it will do in terms of crash reduction. So I'm going to jump back over then to the slides really quick. That was all I wanted to cover in terms of the demo. And so let me wrap up really quickly and then we'll jump over to the Q&A. So in terms of what you just saw was the Safety Insights platform, right? So that's your software solution that's combining the crash data, the roadway data, the connected vehicle data I showed. I didn't even get into a lot of the traffic volume data we integrate from Streetlight. You can layer that in a similar way to how I layered in the connected vehicle insights. And it also helps tie into the hotspot analysis in terms of those underlying exposure metrics. And so that can really be useful, right? As you saw, as kind of that end-to-end analysis toolbox, right? Everything from visualizing the data, choosing different areas to analyze, generating the hotspots, looking at the countermeasures, all of that information. And then we have another offering coming very soon called Safety Insights Connect. And what that is a little bit more of a direct data feed specific to that connected vehicle data and those connected vehicle metrics. So the way that would work is not necessarily the full software interface, but instead just, sort of some specific parameters for a geography, a time period, what events you care about, and then we're able to compile a data package and share it. And so that's one that is coming soon in the works. If people are interested in learning more, we're certainly happy to talk a little bit more about that. And that's there's a lot of potential as we've talked with folks on using that data to stay more up to date on safety trends, whether that's understanding traffic around work zones or maybe the impact of inclement weather events or major events as things start to maybe pick back up post-COVID, like sporting events or concerts, those kind of things. And that can be all the way down to a corridor level, all the way up to a full kind of jurisdiction, like the tool I just showed. So I just wanted to kind of give the overview of the different offerings here. I'm excited to talk more about either of those or both for those who might be interested. And I'll stop there. Thanks again for everyone for listening in and seeing the demo as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have, and our website is listed there as well. Always happy to do follow-up conversations if anyone's interested. So I'll stop there and open it up.
Thank you very much, Cal and Andy. That was very informative, and I really appreciate you taking the time to give us a presentation and show us all about safety insights. We do have 2 questions that came in while you're talking, and I encourage everyone else to keep typing in your questions. We have a lot of Q&A time. First question is, how often is the safety insights crash data updated? Annually, weekly, daily?
Yep, I can take that one. So the crash data specifically comes from the public agency that we're working with. So for example, if we were working with, I was showing the city of Detroit there, we would ask that the city of Detroit or potentially MDOT, the Michigan DOT, they share their crash data with us and we integrate it, and that helps power a lot of the functionality you saw there. And so that's really dependent on how often the data is updated from the source that we're integrating the data from. So we can update it as frequently as possible, as frequently as the data is available. So in some cases, some agencies we've talked with, they update their data annually, their crash data, right? And so at best, the best we can do is pull in those annual updates. In some other cases, we've seen some agencies get down to, monthly or weekly updates or even more frequent than that. And in those cases, we're able to just, as long as we can tie into that data source, we can integrate it. I'll mention for the connected vehicle data, that's one that we are plugging in the data, right? And we can update that. Right now, our default is daily. We're constantly pulling in the previous day of data and adding that to the full data set. So you're always up to date on the trends. And over time, we want to get to more near real time where you'd be able to look at, down to the 15-minute interval or even more frequent kind of update time frame.
All right, thank you very much. And the next question is, what areas do you currently have data for? So basically, is it like all over the US? Is it for all Fords? And do people opt in to get their information collected? How does that all work?
Yeah, so I'll speak to the connected vehicle data side of things. So that's one where we have information ready on our end that is available across the US, right? So we've got data coverage really anywhere across the US that there's decent traffic volume. you'll see decent connected vehicle data coverage within Safety Insights. And so we also, beyond just the US, we announced the city of Windsor as a customer in Canada just recently. So we have pretty substantial data coverage in Windsor as well, and in the Canadian area. In terms of opt-in, that's the way that the data is collected. That's exactly right. So Ford's kind of standard default approach is that while every new vehicle is connectivity enabled, meaning that there's a modem and all the kind of technical hardware and software is on those new vehicles, the connectivity is actually deactivated by default. And every individual consumer has to consent to having their modem activated and their connectivity enabled. And via that consent, then the data is able to be captured. And for us in particular with Safety Insights, I mentioned it, but I'll reiterate again, what we're doing with the data is, there's that underlying source data, but we're aggregating it, de-identifying it, making sure it's safe to use for an application like this, which has some, public good component to it, but we don't want to risk any privacy as a result of using that data. And so we've gone through a very robust process of kind of reviewing how the data is de-identified and aggregated to ensure it's safe at this kind of trend level while not having any risk for the underlying consumers.
Thank you. Next question is, what is the difference between detecting harsh braking and detecting where stop signs or traffic signals are?
That's a great question. So the way that this data in particular is captured is there's different thresholds, right, of what would constitute a harsh brake as opposed to, quote unquote, a normal brake. So that's sort of the key, right, is we're not just simply capturing where is braking happening, we're capturing where is there severe braking or severe acceleration or, really harsh turning movements, those kind of connected vehicle events that have some relationship or some indication of safety activity. And so we've actually started a pretty in-depth analysis and review of how this connected vehicle data relates to the crash data and crash trends. So what is that correlation? What is that relationship between those vehicle events and the crash data? And what we found in high-level terms is there's a really strong and promising relationship. So in other words, the more of those harsh connected vehicle events you see, the more crashes you'll also see. So it can be really useful as a predictor or maybe a leading indicator of safety activity in that way. So we hope to have more to share on that analysis in the near future, but we're pretty excited about the potential use of that data and its relationship to the underlying crash data.
Thank you. And if you can answer this question, it's how accurate is Streetlight's bike and ped data, and how is it collected or generated?
So I'll leave it to the experts at Streetlight, who I'd love to connect whoever asked this question with. We work really closely with Streetlight. They're a great partner of ours. But I'll kind of give my answer, and then there's also great documentation on their website, by the way. They have a pretty detailed technical white paper about all of their metrics, including the ped and bike metrics, how they generate it, all that good stuff. But essentially the high level, broad strokes is they have some input underlying sensor data and kind of IoT data, and they run that and they're able to infer a mode, kind of do mode detection based on the underlying data and say, is this likely a vehicle trip or a pedestrian trip or bicycle trip? And they're able to sort of calibrate that using actual ground truth data. And so they are able to, make their predictions or estimates smarter over time of what is bicycle versus what is pedestrian. And then they're able to sort of calibrate the data in that sense. So one of the reasons that we work with Streetlight, we integrate their data, is because of how transparent they are with a lot of their documentation and a lot of how they, derive their metrics compared to some of the others in the space that maybe have similar metrics or data. And so we, it's something that we really looked into and wanted to understand the data, and is it something that can be useful when plugged in here. And so again, happy to connect folks with some of our contacts from Streetlight if they want to dive into more of the technical details. But again, there's also great stuff on their website. So hopefully that helps.
Well, thank you. We're getting some excellent questions here. Does this data also consider operating speeds, average or spot? And then in parentheses, included in the Connect version is a question.
Yeah, so speed data, like actual speed data, is not something that we've integrated thus far, but there's certainly potential there. Yeah, whether it comes from sort of a installed sensor or something that the city or the agency has sort of implemented on their end, and they have that data feed, and they're interested in plugging it in and seeing the relationship of that data to the crash data and the vehicle data and such. We're happy to talk about potential integrations of additional data like that. And then there is also potential to use the connected vehicle data metrics to get at that kind of underlying speed question. It's not something that we've tackled thus far, but some of that underlying data is certainly available and something that we could look into a bit further. We really focused our efforts initially on those events, right? Those harsh events as something that we knew was kind of immediately relevant. But the speed data question has come up a few times, so definitely something that is, I think, worth looking into.
Thank you. Is there or a plan for a method that other data providers like fleet management app, device manufacturers can provide into the Safety Insights platform?
That's a great question. Yeah, so it's something we're always interested in understanding. How can we enhance the quality of our data and the coverage of our data, especially when it comes to the connected vehicle data side of things. So, there's a lot of good research that's been done that's looked at how much data do you actually need to understand or to infer general traffic trends. And the numbers range anywhere from about 2% to about 8% of vehicles on the road is kind of the number that you need to then be able to infer general trends. So, based on just some of the input Ford connected vehicle data, I mean, we're off to a really good start, right? We've got, millions of connected vehicles on the road today transmitting data. But if there's other ways for, supplementing that, bringing in additional data from other inputs, that's definitely something that I think we're open to, and we need to think about exactly what that would look like. But, the more information you can have, generally you can infer useful trends based on that.
Thank you. Does the tool offer any functionality to support crash prediction model calibration or the use of jurisdiction-specific models?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We're definitely open to sort of localizing some of the underlying back-end calculations. So, like, for example, the network screening method that we use is outlined in the Highway Safety Manual, and the way it works actually is it's running dynamically kind of on the fly based on the underlying data. So it's not like we have some standard, like values that we're just plugging in. It's all based on the underlying data. But if there's other methods, we've talked with some agencies, they don't want to use that network screening method necessarily. They may want to use another. We're certainly open to those kind of discussions. And same with the countermeasure information, right? So the CMF values that you saw on the table, those come from the CMF clearinghouse. And then we kind of use those underlying CMF values to generate predictions about crash reduction and such. And we've talked with some agencies, they say, well, our state has published, state-specific CMF values. Could we integrate those? And, the answer is yes. We're certainly open to ensuring that the background information is going to be the most useful for the folks using the tool. So however we can do that, we're open to those conversations.
Thank you. Have you tried to give a safety score to the intersection based on the connected vehicle data?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's something that we're thinking about, right? Is not just providing, the number of events or the rate of the, harsh events at some location, but how can we convert that into some kind of score or some kind of, maybe easily kind of indexed value that you can compare across locations or across times. So it's something that definitely has been a question in the past, and it's something that, you know, we have on our roadmap. How can we, you know, convert this data into useful insights that then folks can kind of run with and go from there. We want to make sure, you know, we don't abstract it too far to the point that people don't understand what that score might be telling you. But as long as I think we're documenting it clearly, we should be able to get past that.
Thank you. How are the AADT for each intersection estimated? That's like the streetlight data, right?
That's right. That comes from the streetlight data. And if they're wondering specifically about intersections, we just look at the incoming, you know, traffic to that intersection. So we know each segment, and then we can, you know, look at total entering vehicles based on those incoming segments, I guess, is kind of the way that works.
Thank you. Are the connected vehicle data coming only from Ford vehicles?
Yeah, great question. So currently the answer is yes. So we started with our Ford data set for reasons you can probably assume, right, as a Ford kind of mobility product. We wanted to kind of prove out the concept, right, and see what can this data tell us? How can it be useful for safety planning work? And also, I think, you know, as I mentioned, that kind of, you know, how many vehicles do you actually need to infer insight? What we found is, you know, even just with the Ford vehicles, there's extremely useful insight that we can generate. So I mentioned, you know, we're always looking for additional ways to kind of increase the coverage, whether that's more connected Ford vehicles or other vehicles. But we've been pleasantly surprised with just the volume of data that we're able to get, even just off the Ford vehicles today. And as you get more and more, you know, newer model year vehicles and more connected vehicles on the road, the data is only going to get richer, right? So I think this is the perfect time to start to build out the use of the data, because it's only going to grow.
Very true. Is there a way for agencies to see how many Ford vehicles are in their area collecting data?
Yes, definitely. So we've got sort of the full country mapped down to a county level. We can even get more granular than that. So anyone who's interested in a conversation, please reach out. We'd be happy to talk more about the platform and the data coverage for your area. And, you know, what, like I mentioned, there's some different kind of configuration options for how the tool can be implemented in, you know, one area versus another based on what data you have at your disposal as well. So happy to jump into all those discussions and get into the vehicle data coverage question as well. It's one that we get a lot. So we have some answers ready to go.
Thank you. Are harsh events, braking, acceleration, etc., defined the same way industry-wide? For example, Ford and other competitors like Toyota.
It's a great question. It's one that we looked into quite a bit when we kind of started down this journey, right? It's like, how are we defining it? How have others defined it? And so we have some thresholds in place that kind of trigger what's a normal brake versus a harsh brake. And I don't have those pulled up right now, but it's a certain acceleration or deceleration threshold, right? Number of meters per second squared. And so we looked at kind of what others have published or what others maybe are doing. That's, you know, information that we could, you know, find. And we're using a metric that's right in line with kind of the standard ballpark that you see out there. So, you know, depending on how you set that threshold, you'll be more sensitive or less sensitive. You'll get, you know, more of those events or less of those events. But as long as you're within kind of this window that we saw, you know, generally most people are speaking similar language when it comes to harsh braking. We did see there are some differences, but those differences seem to be, you know, reasonable. It would be nice, you know, eventually to have sort of a set standard and we can all agree on that and move forward. But for now, it seems at least people are close, which is good.
That was good. What are the startup costs, time frame for assembling data and preparing the tool for a specific jurisdiction, assuming required data is immediately available from the agency?
It's a great question. So assuming the data's ready to be, you know, kind of handed off, and so the way it works is, let's assume, you know, we want to move forward and we want to work with a new agency. Once we have sort of all the legal stuff in place, we kick off what we call the setup period or the configuration period. And that's where the data is shared with us. We compile the data from our end, we integrate everything, we get all the, features up and running with that new data for that new jurisdiction. We test it and we deploy it, and we generate the login credentials, and we let the folks go use it. So that whole time frame from, okay, we're ready to go, to you have your login credentials and you can use it, is about a month or so of a process. So it can move faster. Again, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. There's wiggle room, but generally we try to, it's a month or sooner is kind of what we've seen.
Thank you. If I offer my data to the pool, is there a method where I can access my own trips performance in the opt-in agreement, such as accessing my own driving?
Oh, it's a great question. So I would have to, so there's, as you might expect, lots of different teams within Ford working on the connected vehicle data, all the way from, the engineering and product development teams that help define the specs of what goes on the vehicle. And then, down the road, the vehicles are on the road and they're generating data and it lands in a database, and, a team like ours is able to go access it. So unfortunately, that's not something that our safety insights team has, access to all the underlying, consumer data and how you might be able to see that. I do know that there's some features on the Ford Pass app where you're able to see some information about like vehicle prognostics that comes from connected vehicle data and that kind of thing. But I'm not sure all of the different kind of features that are available to the end customer. But happy to connect. If someone's really interested, they want to dive in to see what their vehicle is able to generate versus, maybe some others, we can have an offline conversation, and I'll see if I can connect you with the right folks.
All right, next question. Is Ford Mobility making this tool available to other agencies? So basically, what agencies do you look for this product? Can it be small agencies, big agencies, anywhere in between?
Yeah, it can be any agency, right? We're open for conversations right now. So it really is just a matter of, is this an agency that has traffic safety as a top priority? They want to take it seriously. They want to be data driven, and they want to use, best practice methods and some new, innovative data and that kind of thing. If that's the answer to that is yes, I think this could be a great fit, right? And so we're happy to talk through the details and make kind of have the conversations. But really, anyone who saw this and said, wow, this could really help us save time and move faster when it comes to traffic safety. Maybe you have a Vision Zero effort, you're trying to move forward, maybe you don't, but you want to still move on traffic safety. We're happy to help. And that's really the role that we see, right? Is just building tools and insights that can help drive improvement on this problem that we're all trying to tackle, right? So however we can be helpful, we're open to it. And we're a relatively new product. So we're always looking for, input and feedback from our early customers on what do you like, what don't you like, how can we improve it further to make it even more useful for you. It's not set in stone, right? This is an evolving product, and we're always looking for, input from our new customers on how we can improve it. So for those who, are interested in getting in kind of at that level, we're happy to, make the tool even more useful for you as a result. So again, happy to have those conversations.
Thank you. What are some of the performance metrics out of connected vehicle data?
Not sure maybe exactly what they meant by performance metrics, but there's, as you might expect, so connected vehicles generally today, right, they're have many different sensors. They can generate thousands of different events and attributes about a lot of different things that are happening on that given vehicle. For us, what we cared about was not those thousands of events. We tried to narrow in on the metrics or the events that are relevant to traffic safety. So, we don't necessarily need to know the oil life in the vehicle, but we cared a lot about harsh braking or harsh acceleration or traction control events or those other kind of events that maybe have some indication of some issue with the road conditions or the infrastructure, or some maybe the issue with traffic and congestion and drivers having to make maneuvers as a result of that traffic condition. So that's really where we focused in terms of what signals we wanted to source to plug in here. And we're always looking at you know, as the vehicle connectivity matures, we're able to generate more rich, granular insight. And so we're always trying to see what are some additional things that we might be able to pull in the future that just simply wasn't even available in the past. And I think it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of opportunity.
Thank you. Next one's kind of just more of a statement. It's going back to the question of speed. He's saying having travel speed in some form as part of connected vehicle data would be very useful to the agency. Next question is, oh, it's a good question on the equity issues it's a hot topic in transportation today. How do you plan to address equity issues which may arise in focusing on AV/CV data, which tend to overrepresent newer, higher vehicles, value vehicles, and thus higher socioeconomic class motorists?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's one that's come up in the past. So it's something that we are really trying to think carefully about, right? Is we know that when it comes to connected vehicle data, at least today, a lot of the data that you're going to be getting is off of those newer model year vehicles that are, you know, driven by, you know, a biased set of the population, right? It may not necessarily be a representative sample. So there's a few things I think of note here. One is we're not just relying on that connected vehicle data, right? We're also pulling in the crash data, the data from Streetlight, and tying all of this information together, right? So as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, all data has limitations. It's a matter of not ignoring them, right? And understanding what those limitations are, documenting them, and being able to sort of make more informed decisions based on that understanding of those limitations. One of the things that we've are really looking into in an immediate term step is how can we normalize this data, right? So instead of just saying, oh, there were 20 harsh braking events here, it might just mean there's a lot of, you know, newer Ford vehicles driving on that segment. What we're looking at is, was that 20 events, you know, out of just 20 vehicles, or was that 20 events out of 100 vehicles, or was that, right? What's that proportion of activity? So we can understand almost like the percentage of connected vehicle trips that result in a harsh event. So in that way, we're able to correct for some of that skew in terms of the geographic distribution. So you may see there's, you know, a high amount of harsh braking here, but there's also a high amount of traffic, and we can correct for some of those things. And so we're looking at a number of different methods for doing that to ensure that the data isn't just a volume metric, but instead it's actually giving you that proportion or that insight that you need.
Thank you. Next one's a technical question. In regards to network screening, are the SPFs, binomial functions, adjusted with the HSM Part C CMFs to adjust the predicted crashes for conditions that do not line up with the SPF baseline conditions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'd be happy, we have actually some technical documentation that we've compiled for whoever asked this question. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to share. We have some more detail on especially the network screening approach, the one that we're referencing from the HSM, and kind of how we're implementing that. But in short, it's dynamic, right? So we're using the underlying sort of methodology outlined in the HSM for that algorithm. And then essentially the SPFs are developed on the fly, right, in the back end. And it's based on the underlying data that the user has chosen. So hopefully that helps. But again, happy to jump into more of the technical details if there's folks who are interested.
Sounds good, thank you. Has Ford been approached by insurance companies to evaluate driver safety behavior for their own purposes and how they determine insurance premiums?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know there's a lot of work on like usage-based insurance and, you know, using connected vehicle data for insurance purposes. It's not something that we've worked on with the Safety Insights team. I think there's some other teams within Ford that are working on insurance-based collaborations, but not something that I really have any insight into.
Thank you. What model year Ford vehicles can provide the CV data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So There's been connected vehicle sort of availability really when we started to see a reasonable enough volume was starting at about the 2017 model year and newer. So I guess you've got about 5 years or so of vehicles now that had some, reasonable form of connectivity and volume on the road. There's other options for, enhancing that. Like I know there's a lot of fleet management companies that do plug-in devices that can go in older vehicles and that kind of thing. But for us, we focused on those, with the embedded modem, the connected vehicles mostly, again, are about 2017 model year and newer. And as I mentioned, we've got a couple million of those on the road today generating data.
So to add to what Cal mentioned, our goal is to get to 100% connectivity by 2021-22 timeframe. So pretty much every vehicle in the coming months and years, as you see, rolling out of the assembly line, they will have connectivity in them. It's just a matter of them, the consumer consenting to activate the modem at that point in time.
Well, thank you very much. And I have one question too.
Justin, sorry, really fast. Can I jump onto what Andy just said? Is Ford taking a proactive approach and trying to explain the benefits of having consumers turn on that connectivity feature? Because I would guess it starts with a little bit of mistrust, getting to that insurance question previously. So is there sort of an outreach piece associated with that?
Yeah, I can take it, and then Andy, if you can jump in.
Sure.
So I know it's a big thing that, we want to ensure those opt-in rates are higher, right? And what we've done is tried to showcase the value proposition to the end customer, like what's the benefit of having my vehicle connected. And there's a lot that can be provided, right? So early warning prognostics about your vehicle, about your oil life, when you might need to change some parts, that'll ultimately save you money down the road as a vehicle owner, even if you're leasing the vehicle. And there's a number of other kind of features that are in the works to help kind of incentivize, okay, my vehicle's connected, what do I get back for that? What's the incentive? So that's a big part. And I think what we've seen is pretty significant increases in the opt-in rates over the past few years, where now they're well north of 50%. And so hopefully they continue to increase. So that's kind of, I think, the approach that we've taken is ensuring it's not just, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you opted in, but like, okay, what's the incentive?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we don't want to end up like our friends in Silicon Valley answering questions about like privacy breach and all that. So we want to make sure that, we have to behave like we are responsible for our own data safety. So when we talk to our customers, that's a conversation I'm sure like happens in every dealership, not just in ours, but in every automotive company out there. But we take it a little bit more seriously than everybody else out there. And even for me working on a different data product to access our customers' privacy information, I have to go through probably multiple layers of approvals to get to that. So as you can imagine, if that's the controls that we put in place for ourselves internally, you can imagine how we deal with when we are interacting with the customer. So at the end of the day, a century-old business, we are still existing because the reason that we take these things very seriously.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you very much. We just had something that come into the chat pod. The next version of this could be data from insurance companies or the vehicle itself to determine the amount of damage to the vehicle to determine the force of impact. Bodily injury is the only metric to measure the crash. This is kind of really getting into, could the vehicle start providing the crash reports?
That's really, really interesting. And I know there's some work elsewhere on this topic, right? Like, I mean, you can think back even to like OnStar, right? Way back in the day. So this is something that's been around in some form or another with different automakers for many years. But yeah, for us, this kind of ties back into the question of, consent and data privacy and those kind of things. When you're looking at near misses and it's data that you can aggregate pretty easily, it's data that you can anonymize pretty easily, that's kind of the starting point, right? And then when you start to get into sharing actual collision data from a connected vehicle, I think there's an additional layer of sort of consent probably that we would need to go through. So it's not necessarily as much of a technical question as it is a, consumer trust and how do we go about this in a way that, we can, potentially generate useful data. And maybe it's something that a consumer wants to share because they can, there's some benefit to them if maybe they can get quicker, response time in the case of an emergency, or who knows, right? But I think I totally agree that there's opportunity there, but it's a matter of how do you move that forward in a way that's, a good, solid approach.
Thank you. We got another question that came in. When Ford reaches 100% connectivity, does that mean only within the Ford data ecosystem, or will it connect to other roadside units such as CV2X deployed by a road agency or IOO, infrastructure owner operator?
Yeah, great question. So there's a whole separate team at Ford, actually, that we work pretty closely with sometimes, that's working really in depth on CV2X. And so, they've worked with a number of DOTs and, sharing data off the vehicles via CV2X through RSUs, sharing things like basic safety messages and that kind of thing. So there's a whole team working on a lot of that kind of stuff. So, I think the answer is, yeah, there's a lot of good work going on there that ultimately can provide some, in parallel benefit to the tool and the data that we're working on here.
Would you guys be open to, if someone had an RSU in the field and it could collect data from other vehicles to then be imported into your system?
I think we'd be open to that discussion. Yeah, we'd have to understand a little bit more of the detail of, what sort of agreements are in place with that data that's coming through the RSUs. If it's able to be shared with us and we're able to integrate it, certainly, from a technical standpoint, yes, that can definitely be done.
It'll be more on a case-by-case basis.
Right, exactly.
Makes sense. I don't see any other questions. Karen, do you have any more questions?
I guess my question is just, Cal and Andy, are you the right to, if some of our audience members want more information or to figure out how this might integrate well with their kind of agency or clients, are you guys the right people to reach out to?
Yeah, definitely. Please reach out, and we'd be happy to have more detailed conversations with folks. So I see Andy shared his email. I'll put mine in there as well.
Yeah, so if they can reach out to me or Cal directly, we'll make sure to get back to them shortly.
All right, well, thank you guys very much for taking the time to do the webinar and show us Ford safety insights. And like I said, in January, when you presented it to me, I was very blown away. I was kind of under the impression that the word needs to get out because this can really help a lot of different government agencies. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks again, Justin, and everyone for listening in and the great questions. Honestly, it's a lot of really good questions. So, yeah, thanks again to everyone.
Can I ask one last question before we wrap up? Have you all seen where agencies are partnering up to do this on a larger scale, where maybe the county is partnering with local municipalities, or local municipalities are just getting together to handle this on kind of a less isolated approach, or are you mainly dealing with single clients at this point?
So we've mainly worked with individual agencies. However, we've seen this questions come up around multi-agency, right? And how might that work? Especially if you have like, you think about geographically, like a parent agency and, the sub geographies within that, maybe a state DOT and all the local agencies, or MPO and the local agencies within that MPO. So we have some approaches for how we would handle that. We're definitely open to kind of having that multi-agency, operation and implementation in place. So we have some thoughts there, definitely.
Maybe Chicago MPO or the Illinois DOT can be the first one to embark on that process.
And the financial background.
Yeah, I mean, as Cal pointed out, this could be a good opportunity for us to see like the impacts on a regional, region-wide or statewide level. Because if you look at it as a small community, it could be somewhat of a limited benefit. But if you start scaling it up, I think the benefits could be much larger. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, as I am a municipal representative, and, you know, we have state and county roads, and we share boundaries with other municipalities. We share intersections with other municipalities. And so it seems like the application would work well kind of in that multi-agency time frame. So thank you.
Sure. And I had some conversations with our friends here at Michigan DOT about potentially them acquiring it and making it available to other agencies across the state. You know, so it depends on like what model appeals to individual agencies and what kind of demand there exists. So as Cal pointed out, sort of like take as they come and one-on-one, just evaluate their merits and then just go forward with that. But we're open to any suggestions and conversations with you guys.
All right, and thank you very much. Any last comments or words?
This was outstanding. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good one. Bye now.